All right, so figure we should do this because we're both gearheads and it should be a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll get to it.
Alrighty.
Just some background, I guess. We've been doing music for a while now, and
yeah, a few years I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, shopping for stuff, looking at how you put together your rig, had some similarities to how I would put together mine.
Right.
And as a bass player, there's things that I look for when I'm putting together a rig. There's the things I need to have, like my hi-hat, my ride.
Right.
Your hi-hat, your ride, my distortion, my tuner.
For sure.
But I feel like there's those necessities, but past that, there's some other cool stuff, and I think that's what you brought over here today.
Things you choose to add on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when it comes to setting up your working and playing space, I think you're always considering what the necessities are versus what do I want to have on there because I'm me, and that feels like something that I would have on. I knew when I was picking a ride cymbal, it was okay, I use my ride cymbal frequently, but how could I make it a 2-for-1 maybe, some crashability. And I think in a lot of rides that maybe you buy when you're starting out, you're not immediately thinking about does this cymbal have 2 functions?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the first priority. It's okay, first it has to sound like a ride cymbal. It can fit into ride parts. You pick your bell. But again, that's not even kind of a beginner thing,
Yeah.
I feel like when you're, I'm looking for a mega bell, you've been playing for a little bit because now you know something like that exists, like a Chris Adler kind of thing. But I really wanted a ride cymbal with crashability. And it turns out this Sabian 22-inch HHX heavy legacy ride is perfect. I'm pretty sure the drummer from Meshuggah, he uses it as a crash cymbal only because I've never heard him use it as a ride cymbal, So the fact that it sounds good as a ride and sounds great as a crash is, I don't know, where I am now, I'm looking for things that are, I don't know, they blend together well. It's not a cymbal that's too bright, and because it's not too bright, you can hit other cymbals at the same time. I mean, you're recording something, the sound is going to be happening anyways, even if you hit the cymbal a few bars ago or whatever. But it just sits well, and it's crashable. So much in the same way that you'd set up a pedal rig, I would think you would be thinking about things that could either go together or cover your bases so that you're satisfied.
Right. That's one of the things that impressed me, shopping around for cymbals and watching you choose those out, is your ear for it. I don't think there was ever one that you're you took it home and you're oh, this sucks. At least that I saw. Maybe there was, but
I mean, there's, you think it's one thing, but you always have to hear it in the context of other things because that's when it that's when it matters the most, I think. Mm-hmm. Because rarely there's an opportunity where you're just playing one cymbal, I guess. I mean, okay, a pair of hi-hats are going to have to sound good by themselves, but I think the big picture involves just looking at everything. So it leads me to darker sounds now because they're not as sharp, but they're still loud. I think there's a difference between being loud and being bright.
Yes.
Yeah. So I really lean towards they sound sizzly, a darker sizzle of attack. That's my new strategy.
Has some grind to it at the end.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It also just sounds good with deeper drums. When I have used the bubingas, it's a thicker shell. Just the wood is denser than maybe maple or birch, and so I don't know, those deep tones with a dark cymbal selection. I think it's very 2018.
So when we first got started with this and recording, it started out with Zildjian primarily.
Right.
Some of those are smashed up, still around here somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. They are around, and they are broken.
Yes. So, I guess cymbal-wise, kind of made the move over to Sabian at some point. Kind of what prompted that?
Actually, Sabian cymbals were just easier to get because, I don't know, they're North American cymbals,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just always in our local guitar center, so that's like a huge reason. But they are also really, across the board, they just struck me as being crisp. Every time I hit one, and then I would buy it, and we recorded it, it would sound like the same as if I was just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can be hard to explain, but they sounded more honest, and that was good for me because I think that helped me figure out my sound quicker. What I guess at least what I wanted to go towards, and I enjoyed playing the Zildjians, and they definitely had their place, but sometimes I thought they were too bright, and that could have been just because of the cymbals I was playing that happened to be Zildjian. But playing Zildjian cymbals, I think, ultimately helped me realize that I wanted a darker sound. And a darker sound isn't even it can still be loud, but I think there are more dimensions to the sound if you play darker cymbals because they're not as invasive in the mix. So Sabian really helped me do that.
Now, speaking of dark versus bright, there was a mixture when we started out, or I guess previous videos you've done. There's a mixture of A's and HHX, HH.
Right.
HH tends to be a bit darker, right?
Yeah, HH is darker because I think, HH symbol stands for hand hammered. So, I don't know, that's more unpredictable, I think. But even, all the crash cymbals we've tried, I mean, it's still, I don't mean unpredictable in a bad way, but, I think, honestly, it's a good thing. Because at this point, it's what new sound is going to catch my attention? Even the AAX frequency hats that we used way back in the day.
That's what I was going to mention with that, yeah.
They were, I don't know, they just sounded fuller and darker than other hi-hats I had been using, I really like how clear they were, honestly. And AAX doesn't mean, going to destroy the the mixing process because of how bright they are. But I think that sound fit perfectly for what we were going for. And if I didn't break those two, we'd still be using them.
So we had a ton of cymbals, over time and on certain kits. A lot of cymbals.
Oh yeah. Embarrassing to think about how many.
And now it's definitely more condensed and it's definitely more focused. I don't know, just at that point in time, I think it was a lot of because we could.
Oh yeah, it was fun.
Certainly did. It was
fun. Literally fun. And if you don't think playing with two Chinas is fun, then you know what? Maybe you're just more mature than I am. But no, it's just for the sake of trying out different setups, and you want to see what kind of sounds you can get because you can.
Right. So downsizing from that, I guess, it seems, at least from my perspective, there would be sonic holes to fill. Moving from a lot of cymbals that could accomplish a lot of things to a smaller number of cymbals that didn't need to accomplish exactly the same things, but similar sort of vibes. Did you fall into any of that at all? Did you have some sounds that you were missing or are currently missing?
I think my criteria changed and became smaller, actually. So, therefore, I don't think I was missing anything. But I think I was just looking for more musical sounds that were just pleasing to listen to. Like that ride cymbal that I was playing earlier, the 22-inch HHX Legacy ride. It is, for me, a few cymbals in one. And because of that, I think, really that's why it's there. Because it's such a crash cymbal, but it's such a ride cymbal. And it has a bell. There's nothing I don't like about it. And having that allows me to pick different crash cymbals. Because I have a third crash, So I don't base the crash cymbals that I play off of that, but I always want to think about how they affect each other,
Yeah.
And it definitely works with that Evolution crash, because the Evolution crash, despite being a 16, is just it sounds so musical. So it's great, and it's an HHX, but it's like cool and crisp, and it sizzles, and it sounds musical. So it fits so many situations.
Awesome. So, I know in my rig, I have my necessities. I have my things that are always there. They don't change. Become a core part of what I do. Do leave one space open though that I kind of swap out, and it's gotten to a point where it has to be in the same kind of vein of sound because there are some parts that are written around it, but it's something that I do switch out if someone comes out with something new or I come across something cool that would fit the bill. It usually ends up there. Do you have any cymbals like that or any spots, any types of cymbals that you swap out pretty frequently?
When it comes to China cymbals, in the past, I think that is one that rotates a lot. I've actually gone down in size, down to a 14, but that one is. I think it encourages me to play the China less, to use it more as an accent, And I mean, I have experimented with using a bigger one on the left, also just to it makes the setup look different, which in turn makes it feel different, but having it above the hi-hats or just out of a normal position it would be in, I think makes you use it differently. So I've kind of tried that with the hi-hats in terms of just moving the position instead of changing the cymbals. But when it comes to that one spot that I'm always, looking for new cymbals to fill, it goes to effect cymbals. Because, I don't know, I always want my ride cymbal because it's also a crash cymbal. And the crash cymbals are a fundamental part of the drum set, and so are hi-hats. Otherwise, it's just about splash and effects. And having a stacks of cymbal, I think that's really good too, because that is percussive and it's less melodic. Because of that, you think about it like a drum. And it also is a variation of hi-hats. And it's a new look, not a new look, a different look on hi-hats because it's just, you can't open or close them.
Yeah.
They're always sizzling. So,
right on.
Trashy and sizzly. Those are two adjectives I would use to describe new cymbals I'm looking for to put in that one spot that is constantly rotating.
Awesome. Again, speaking of cymbals, man, we've had a ton down here, like we said earlier. Do you have a top 3 that you would, I don't know, that you've played, and you've played a ton, I'm sure, beyond this? Just any that kind of stick out.
These the hats I'm playing over here I like, but I think I like the frequency hats the most, maybe because we spend so much time with them, But out of current cymbals that are here,
or just in general.
That's true, right? I mean, there were so many over the time. Okay, you know what? Do you remember that 10-inch Mino Byzance Darks? That was the best sounding splash of all time. Just trying out a new brand and a different, something that's not one company. There's nothing keeping you from just picking and choosing, but we have a tendency, to organize like that. So, or at least maybe it's just me. So going and getting that Mino Splash was a great addition. And honestly, when I put the 8-inch Sabian AA Splash on top of that, it created the best sounding stack I've ever. It sounded so much bigger than it was. It sounded like a sustained, it sounded like Sandy. It was gritty. I really liked it. It was perfect for using in patterns, and it sounded good when it was recorded. I really like the AAX frequency crash. I still have one, and I think it's still part of the active rotation because it just fits the situation so many times, and it's aggressive, but it's melodic.
That was one of those cymbals, man, that when you first got it, I was kind of like, what am I gonna do with this? Because by itself, and I guess it's the point, it's a frequency crash. It has a really it has a really interesting frequency that it sits at least to my ears, and at least mics I'm using in the situation we're in here.
How did you have to adjust to it?
So, I don't know if it was as much of an adjustment thing, and I definitely tried EQ-wise just to figure out what that was, but once you put it in a mix, and once you put it in the context of a song or even a drum kit, it worked really well. But whenever it was soloed or anything like that, without any music happening, it was just like, oh. But the second that it got in the mix, it was decent. So
Right.
it was, I don't know, it was just an interesting one for me.
Yeah, it's interesting how our priorities change over time. Like, you want everything to sound good together as opposed to one thing sounding good only by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good goal to move towards, because then you have to put other instruments on top of that. Because there's one thing to be said for trying something out for the sake of, accenting it.
Mm-hmm.
But in a bigger picture, there's only going to be more moving parts, So why not pick something that is really inviting to, like, more styles of playing from the other players as well. But you know what? I say try everything you can, because that'll probably lead to something unique and something that you weren't going to come up with just doing the same thing every day.
Right.
Vary it up a little bit. Like, what you can always change it back.
Yeah. Indeed.
There's always the Holy China, though. I mean, despite everything I just said, probably the loudest piece of metal I've ever hit. I think we got the 19 variation. If the 21 would have been, I would have needed to wear extra hearing protection, I think, to do a recording with that thing. But I really like that cymbal. I mean, for what it is, it's like just so aggressive.
Yeah.
And fun to play, That's like the common theme here. Cymbals are fun to play. And that means the most.
Mm.
So my favorite ones were the ones that were fun to play.
Yeah. As it should be, It should be something that inspires you to dig deeper into your own playing than into what you can get out of the gear that you're using. It's always fun. So, had a lot of drums too, a lot of snares.
Wow.
Any top three from we have any top three from those?
The Cherry Babinga, that mythic creature of a snare drum.
I need to get another one of those, man.
I think I really liked it because it felt alive because it was a wooden snare drum, but it was loud and aggressive because it was a thick snare drum, and it was dense. And I think it was it a 7x14 maybe?
Was it that deep?
I think it was.
It
definitely
14,
wasn't the
definitely.
standard like 5.5.
Okay.
It was definitely a deeper drum, and that's a great parameter to mess around with too, because a drum that's deeper, tuned at a higher pitch, is still going to have a particular sound versus a smaller drum that's tuned at the same pitch. I think it makes it louder, and it also adds to the whole situation, and because of that, maybe it fills out the bottom end more while still creating a lot of attack. So I enjoyed that drum a lot. And the Starphonic Walnut that I'm playing right now, I really enjoy too, because it's lightweight but it's loud. It's musical, but it's also really focused. Like, the overtones, I think, are actually desirable to some degree, as opposed to some drums that really ring. A wood drum isn't going to ring as much because it's more porous, and I think that's important to consider. But there's just always a time and a place for everything, and I love playing metal snare drums too. Like, copper snare drums. Like, if you threw that at someone, they would be in a lot of pain because they're so heavy, and because of that, it lends itself to being better in certain situations. Like, it's just always going to be loud. So you tap it and you get a loud, dead sound, and it's really dry. And it's also dark, so really when that drum is tuned up, it's like not even too bright, but it's still so loud. You know, so that is definitely one of my favorites as well. It's funny though, because we've had drums that we haven't even been able to like maximize their potential. You know, I feel like the Birch Babinga snare that we started off with, the wood finish one, natural finish, it's like it didn't have the same sweet spot, so we didn't even maximize some of the gear we've had.
Yeah.
So going forward, I think it's important that we try different tunings, you know, and that way we can get different sounds that we weren't gonna get before, you know.
Word.
But tuning requires work, so that could be some of the problems sometimes. But you know, I think we're already moving in a lot of interesting directions with the sounds we've picked now.
Definitely. Yeah, it sounded good, man. Awesome. Well, we'll have some audio and a little bit of you jamming on them, so that should be cool. Thank you for answering some questions, as always, man.
Absolutely. I love the gear, too. It makes playing my instrument fun because there's so many things you can tweak about it, and there's so many parts to it that you can personalize, and you can really look into it forever. There's just so much out there. And then once you realize there's a certain amount, it's like, oh no, it's much bigger. And then you're like, wow, this is huge. And then, nope, it's bigger. So
it's all fun.
Yeah, it's cool watching the universe of gear expand until you're like, well, I could be into this forever. And then
Kind of are.
you kind of are.